In downtown's First National Bank, a struggling young woman was about to face her worst financial nightmare. What started as a routine banking transaction took a shocking turn when she came face to face with the sister who had vanished 5 years ago. Aliza Anderson wasn't your typical broke graduate. For 5 years, she had survived on 2 jobs and sheer determination, known for her fierce independence. When she encountered Lily's unexpected slap and public humiliation, she had no idea she was walking into a family secret worth millions. Aliza's desperate search for answers would lead to uncovering an inheritance designed to destroy them. What began as a declined card would become a journey of forgiveness that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The card reader beeped 3 times. Each sound cut through the marble-walled silence of First National Bank like a judgment. Aliza Anderson stared at the small screen displaying those devastating words, insufficient funds. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your card has been declined," the teller said, her voice carrying that particular blend of professional courtesy and barely concealed pity that Aliza had come to recognize. "Would you like to try a different payment method?" Heat flooded Aliza's cheeks as she fumbled through her worn leather wallet, a graduation gift from her parents that had seen better days, its edges frayed from 5 years of constant use. Her fingers moved mechanically through the empty compartments where credit cards should have been, past the stack of expired coupons she couldn't afford to use anyway, searching for cash she knew wasn't there. Behind her, she could hear the subtle shuffle of feet as the line of customers grew restless. Someone cleared their throat. A child's voice asked, "Mommy, why is that lady taking so long?" The mother's shh only made the attention more obvious. "Maybe there's been a mistake," Aliza said, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. She'd perfected this tone over years of practice, confident, unruffled, as if declined cards were merely minor inconveniences rather than catastrophes. "Could you try running it again?" The teller's expression softened, with understanding that made everything worse. "Of course." The machine beeped 3 times again. Aliza's mind raced through calculations she'd already done a dozen times that morning. Her paycheck from the coffee shop, $247 after taxes, should have been enough to cover the minimum balance requirement. But then there was the overdraft fee from last week when her electric bill auto-drafted a day early, and the monthly maintenance fee she'd forgotten about, and... "I'll need to check my balance," she said, maintaining that careful facade of calm control. "There must be some confusion with my account." As the teller pulled up her information, Aliza caught her reflection in the security camera monitor mounted above the counter. 27 years old, wearing the same black blazer she'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago, now slightly too loose from the weight she'd lost when groceries became a luxury. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun that hid the fact that she couldn't afford regular haircuts. To anyone watching, she might look like any other young professional conducting routine banking business. The image in the monitor reminded her of another reflection she'd seen 5 years ago. Herself in the bathroom mirror at the funeral home, trying to compose her face before walking into the viewing room where her parents lay in matching caskets. She'd been 22 then, still believing that her business degree would open doors, still expecting Lily to help her figure out what came next. "You're being dramatic, as always," Lily had said that day, her voice cold and distant as she stood by their mother's coffin. "They're gone, Aliza. We have to deal with reality now." That had been their last real conversation. 3 days later, while Aliza was still trying to navigate insurance claims and funeral expenses, Lily had simply vanished. No forwarding address, no phone number, just a brief note saying she needed space to process and would be in touch when the time was right. 5 years of silence. 5 years of Aliza learning that the time would apparently never be right. "Your current balance is negative $37.43, the teller said quietly, interrupting the memory. "It looks like there was an overdraft fee that posted this morning." The number hit like a physical blow. Negative $37. She'd been so careful, so precise with her calculations. But careful wasn't enough when you were living with margins this thin. I see, Aliza said, her voice steady though her hands had started to tremble slightly. I'll need to make a deposit then. She reached into her purse for the envelope containing her paycheck from yesterday's shift at the marketing firm, her good job that paid $12 an hour for data entry work that her business degree had supposedly prepared her for. The check was smaller than usual. They'd cut her hours again, citing budget constraints that somehow never seemed to affect the manager's new cars in the parking lot. The teller processed the deposit with practiced efficiency, but she could see the math in her head. After the deposit cleared, she'd have maybe $200 to last until next week. Rent was due in 3 days, her student loan payment was already overdue, the electric company had sent a final notice. She thought about her former classmates from college, the ones whose LinkedIn updates she couldn't stop herself from checking. Sarah Martinez had just been promoted to senior analyst at a Fortune 500 company. Kevin Chen had bought his second house. Rachel Thompson was planning a European honeymoon that probably cost more than Aliza made in 6 months. They all had something she didn't. Family support. Parents who could co-sign leases, provide emergency funds, offer connections and opportunities. They had safety nets while she'd been performing a high-wire act without one. And now she was falling. Your deposit will be available immediately, the teller said, handing back her receipt. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you, Aliza managed, her throat tight with the effort of maintaining composure. She folded the receipt carefully, as if the precise creases could somehow make the numbers different, and turned toward the exit. The bank's marble floors clicked beneath her worn heels, shoes she'd resoled twice because buying new ones wasn't an option. The sound echoed in the high-ceilinged space, mixing with the quiet conversations of other customers who conducted their business with the casual confidence of people who'd never seen insufficient funds on a screen. She pushed through the heavy glass doors into the afternoon heat, feeling the weight of every stare she'd imagined, every whispered comment about the woman who couldn't manage a simple transaction. The sun was brutal against her blazer, but she couldn't afford to drive with the air conditioning on. As she walked toward her car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a loose exhaust pipe, Aliza allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of despair she'd been holding back. 30 seconds to feel the full weight of 5 years of struggle, of pride swallowed and dignity sacrificed, of dreams deferred so long they'd started to feel like delusions. Then she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and prepared to drive to her evening shift at the coffee shop, where she'd smile at customers and make small talk about their days while calculating whether she had enough gas to make it through the week. She'd survived this long on her own. She'd figure out a way to survive whatever came next. Behind her, the bank's doors opened again, and a familiar voice cut through the afternoon air. A voice she hadn't heard in 5 years but would recognize anywhere. Aliza? What the hell are you doing here? Aliza froze at the sound of that voice. The voice that had once whispered bedtime stories and shared secrets, the voice that had cut her to pieces with its final words 5 years ago. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs, half convinced she was hallucinating from stress and exhaustion. But there was Lily, standing 10 feet away like an apparition materialized from Aliza's worst nightmares and deepest longings. Her older sister looked nothing like the hollow-eyed woman who'd fled after their parents' funeral. This version of Lily wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Aliza's monthly rent. Her dark hair styled in a sleek bob that spoke of expensive salons. Diamond earrings caught the afternoon light, and her manicured nails gleamed as she adjusted the strap of a leather handbag that screamed designer luxury. Lily. The name came out as barely a whisper, 5 years of accumulated hurt and anger choking off her voice. I asked you a question. Lily's tone was sharp, imperious, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the concrete with authority. What are you doing here? Making a scene, as usual? The casual cruelty in those words hit Aliza like a physical blow. After 5 years of silence, this was what her sister chose to lead with, an accusation and an insult wrapped in the same dismissive tone that had haunted Aliza's memories. Making a scene? Aliza's voice found its strength, fueled by years of suppressed rage. I was conducting my business at the bank, something I'm apparently entitled to do without your permission? Look at you. Lily's eyes swept over Aliza's appearance. The worn blazer, the resoled shoes, the careful composure that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion. Her expression shifted to something that might have been pity, which somehow felt worse than the initial hostility. Look at you, Lily said, her voice dropping to that particular register of disappointment that had always been her specialty. Still playing the victim, aren't you? Still making everything about your suffering. My suffering? The words exploded out of Aliza before she could stop them. You disappeared. You vanished without a trace while I was left to handle everything, the funeral arrangements, the insurance claims, the lawyers. You left me completely alone. Several bank customers had stopped their conversations to watch the drama unfolding in the parking lot. She could see them through the glass doors, their faces pressed close to the windows like spectators at an accident. But she was beyond caring about appearances now. 5 years of careful composure cracked like ice under pressure. I left you alone? Lily's laugh was bitter, hollow. You've always been alone, Aliza. Even when we were kids, you were always wrapped up in your own little world of drama and self-pity. Mom and Dad spent half their time managing your emotional crises. The reference to their parents was like salt in an open wound. Don't you dare talk about them. You weren't even at the hospital when they died. You were too busy with your own life to be there when it mattered. I was there when it mattered. Lily snapped, her polished facade cracking to reveal something raw underneath. I was there for the funeral, for the arrangements, for all of it. And then I watched you fall apart and demand that everyone else pick up the pieces just like you always did. I was 22! Aliza's voice rose, drawing more attention from passerbys. I was 22 years old and my parents had just died in a car accident. I'm sorry if grief wasn't convenient for you. Everything is always about your grief, isn't it? Your pain, your struggles, your needs. Did you ever once think about what I might have been going through? Did you ever consider that maybe I was hurting too? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. For a moment, Aliza saw something vulnerable flash across her sister's face. A glimpse of the old Lily, the one who used to comfort her during storms and help her with homework. But the moment passed so quickly she might have imagined it. You had a funny way of showing it, she said, her voice trembling with the effort of holding back tears. Disappearing for 5 years without a word, no phone calls, no letters, nothing. I didn't even know if you were alive. You didn't try very hard to find out. How was I supposed to find you? You changed your phone number, moved without leaving an address? You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me. Lily's jaw tightened, and for a moment she looked like she might say something else, something that might explain the inexplicable, but instead her expression hardened again. Maybe that should have told you something, she said coldly. The words landed like a slap, but Aliza pushed forward, driven by 5 years of unanswered questions. Why now? Why are you here, looking like— She gestured to Lily's expensive clothes, her obvious prosperity. Where did all this come from? 5 years ago, you were working retail, living paycheck to paycheck just like the rest of us. Something flickered in Lily's eyes. Guilt, maybe? Or fear? Things change, Aliza. People move on. Some of us don't spend 5 years wallowing in the past. Wallowing? The word came out as a snarl. I've been working 2 jobs to survive while you've apparently been living like some kind of— Like what? Lily's tone turned dangerous. Say it, Aliza. What exactly are you accusing me of? The tension between them had reached a breaking point. Other customers had begun gathering near the bank's entrance, drawn by the escalating confrontation. Aliza could see them through the glass doors, their faces pressed close to the windows like spectators at an accident. But she was beyond caring about public dignity now. I'm saying that while I've been struggling to pay rent and buy groceries, you've apparently been doing just fine for yourself, and you never once thought to check if your sister might need help? Help? Lily's laugh was sharp, cutting. You mean enable your perpetual victim complex? Give you more reasons to feel sorry for yourself instead of actually taking responsibility for your life?
Take responsibility? My voice rose to near shouting. I've done nothing but take responsibility. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to build something from nothing with no help from anyone. No help? Lily stepped closer, her face flushed with anger. You've always had help, Aliza. You just never appreciated it because it didn't come wrapped in the exact package you wanted.
The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then Lily's hand moved faster than thought, connecting with Aliza's cheek in a sharp crack that echoed off the bench walls. The slap sent Aliza stumbling backward, her hand flying to her stinging face. For a moment, the entire parking lot fell silent. Even the traffic seemed to pause. Every customer, every passerby, every bank employee who'd wandered outside to watch the spectacle stood frozen in shock. Lily stared at her own hand as if it belonged to someone else, her face pale with the realization of what she'd done. In the sudden silence, both sisters seemed to register simultaneously that they were standing in the most public place possible, having just provided entertainment for half the town. But before either could speak, before Aliza could process the full humiliation of being slapped in front of dozens of witnesses, the bank's glass doors burst open and a man in an expensive suit came rushing toward them. "Miss Anderson," he called out, his voice tight with concern and something that sounded almost like panic. "Miss Anderson, I'm so sorry about this disturbance." Robert Martinez approached with the urgent stride of a man trying to prevent a catastrophe, his expensive suit perfectly pressed despite his obvious distress. Aliza's cheek still burned from Lily's slap, but something in the bank manager's tone made her lower her hand and stare at him in confusion. "Miss Anderson," he repeated, slightly out of breath as he reached them, "I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. If there's been some sort of misunderstanding with our services, I assure you we'll resolve it immediately." Aliza blinked, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. The man was clearly addressing Lily, but his tone was all wrong, differential, almost panicked, like an employee addressing his boss rather than a bank manager dealing with disruptive customers. "It's fine, Robert," Lily said quietly, her earlier fury replaced by something that looked almost like panic. "Just a family matter." Of course," Martinez said, wringing his hands. "But perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more private. Your office upstairs is available, naturally." "Your office?" The words hit Aliza like cold water. She looked between Lily and the bank manager, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Around them, the gathered spectators had fallen silent, straining to catch every word of this increasingly surreal conversation. "I don't think that's necessary," Lily said, her voice tight with control. She shot a meaningful look at the crowd of onlookers. "We're just leaving." "But Miss Anderson," Martinez persisted, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper that still carried in the afternoon air. "But as the building owner, you shouldn't have to deal with any unpleasantness in a public space. Please, let me escort you upstairs where we can handle this properly." The world tilted sideways. Building owner? Aliza felt her knees go weak as the words penetrated her consciousness. She stared at Lily, really looked at her, taking in details she'd missed in her emotional fury. The flawless manicure, the designer handbag, the cut of that navy suit that screamed money, the way Martinez was treating her not like a customer, but like, "You own this building?" Aliza said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question. Lily's face had gone pale, her carefully constructed composure cracking under the weight of exposure. "Aliza, let me explain." "You own this building," Aliza repeated, louder now. Her voice carried across the parking lot, reaching the ears of every spectator who'd gathered to watch the drama unfold. The murmurs started immediately. I could hear fragments of conversation. Did she say owner? That's Lily Anderson? No wonder she drives that Mercedes. But they seemed to come from very far away. Her entire world had narrowed to the sight of her sister's stricken face. "Ma'am," Martinez said gently, addressing Aliza directly for the first time, "perhaps we should move this discussion somewhere more appropriate. Miss Anderson's office has complete privacy, and we can—"
Miss Anderson's office, Aliza echoed, her voice hollow with disbelief. She felt like she was speaking underwater, every word requiring tremendous effort. You have an office in the bank building that you own. Lily looked trapped, her eyes darting between Aliza and the growing crowd of spectators. Several people had taken out their phones, undoubtedly recording the scene for social media. The controlled, distant woman who'd slapped her sister moments ago had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely afraid. "How long?" Aliza asked, her voice growing stronger as the full implications began to sink in. "How long have you owned this building while I've been living paycheck to paycheck?" 3 years, Lily whispered, the admission poured from her lips like a confession under torture. 3 years, Aliza repeated the words slowly, letting their full weight settle in. 3 years you own this building. The building where I just had my card declined for insufficient funds. The building where I was humiliated because I don't have $37 to my name. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the increasingly dramatic nature of the revelation. I could see bank employees pressed against the windows, their faces a mixture of shock and recognition. Clearly, some of them knew exactly who Lily Anderson was and exactly how wealthy she'd become.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "You watched me struggle," Aliza continued, her voice gaining power as the reality crashed over her in waves. "You've been sitting in your office upstairs, watching me scrape together change for gas money, and you said nothing?" "It's not that simple," Lily said desperately. "You don't understand the circumstances." "The circumstances?" Aliza's laugh was sharp, bitter. "What circumstances could possibly justify letting your sister live in poverty while you own commercial real estate?" Martinez cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we really should move this conversation upstairs. Miss Anderson, your privacy—" "My privacy is gone, Robert," Lily said quietly, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "Everyone heard you. Everyone knows now." She looked at Aliza with something that might have been regret. "Yes, I own this building. Yes, I've been wealthy for 3 years. And yes, I watched you struggle without helping. But before you hate me any more than you already do, you should know that I had no choice." "No choice?" Aliza's voice rose again. "No choice but to let me suffer?" "No choice but to stay away from you," Lily said, her voice breaking slightly. "No choice but to cut all ties, no matter how much it killed me to watch from a distance." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither sister was ready to explore. Around them, the crowd continued to grow, phones capturing every moment of the Anderson family's very public breakdown. But for Aliza, the spectators had ceased to exist. Her entire focus was on her sister, this stranger in expensive clothes who claimed she'd been forced to abandon her family, who spoke of watching from a distance as if she'd been a prisoner rather than a woman with enough money to own buildings. "Explain it then," Aliza said, her voice deadly quiet. "Explain to me how someone gets forced to become wealthy and heartless." Lily glanced around at the crowd, at the phones recording every word, their every word, at M. Martinez hovering nearby like an anxious guardian. When she looked back at Aliza, her expression was resigned. "Not here," she said finally. "Not like this. If you want the truth, we do this privately." She turned to Martinez. "Open my office. We're going upstairs." The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt eternal. Aliza stood in the corner, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, while Lily stared at the floor numbers as if they held the secrets of the universe. Martinez had tactfully remained downstairs, promising to handle the situation with the lingering spectators and their phones. When the doors opened, Lily led the way down a carpeted hallway lined with oil paintings that probably cost more than Aliza's annual salary. At the end of the corridor, double oak doors bore a brass nameplate, L. Anderson, Private Office. The office beyond was a monument to wealth and power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while mahogany furniture gleamed under the light of an actual crystal chandelier. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, and the walls displayed what appeared to be original artwork. A sitting area with leather chairs faced a massive desk that could have doubled as a small dining table. Aliza had seen luxury before, in magazines, in movies, in the lobbies of buildings where she'd interviewed for jobs she never got. But standing in a space that belonged to her sister, breathing air that smelled of expensive leather and fresh flowers, felt surreal beyond comprehension. "Jesus, Lily," she whispered, turning slowly to take it all in. This is insane." Lily moved to the windows, keeping her back to Aliza. "Sit down, please." "I'll stand." Aliza's voice was sharp, with barely controlled rage. Being surrounded by such luxury while her own bank account sat in the negative felt like a deliberate cruelty. "How long were you planning to let me believe you were dead, or broke, or just too selfish to care what happened to me?" "I never wanted you to think I was dead." "Then what? Because for 5 years I've been telling myself stories about where you might be. Maybe you were struggling too. Maybe you were dealing with your own grief. Maybe you were just trying to find yourself." Aliza's voice rose with each word. "I never imagined you were sitting in a goddamn palace counting your money." Lily turned then, and for the first time since their confrontation began, she looked genuinely vulnerable. Her perfect composure had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "You think this was easy for me?" she asked quietly. "You think I wanted to cut you out of my life? You think you made a choice? I think you chose money over family, just like—" She stopped herself before finishing the sentence, but Lily heard it anyway. "Just like who, Aliza?" "Just like grandmother Eleanor." The name hung between them like a curse. Aliza felt something cold settle in her stomach. Eleanor Anderson had been a distant figure in their childhood, their mother's estranged mother who'd disapproved of their father and barely acknowledged their existence. "What does she have to do with anything?" Aliza asked, though part of her already dreaded the answer. Lily moved to her desk and pulled out a chair, sinking into it as if the weight of the conversation was too much to bear standing. "Eleanor died 8 years ago, before Mom and Dad, before any of this." "She left me money, Aliza. A lot of money. Her entire estate, actually." The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that Aliza couldn't quite grasp. "That's impossible. She hated us. She hated Mom for marrying Dad, hated us for existing. She never even sent birthday cards." "She hated our family, yes, but she left everything to me." Lily's voice was hollow, mechanical. "The real estate empire, the investments, everything, with conditions." "What conditions?" She was quiet for so long that Aliza thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I had to cut all ties with the family for 5 years. Complete estrangement. No contact, no financial support, nothing. If I broke that condition even once, I'd lose everything." The room seemed to tilt around Aliza. She gripped the back of a leather chair to steady herself. "You're lying." "I wish I was." "That's—" She struggled to find words. "That's insane. That's evil. Why would anyone—" "Because she wanted to punish us. Punish Mom for choosing love over money. Punish Dad for stealing her daughter. Punish us for being the products of that choice." Lily's voice grew stronger, fueled by old anger. "She designed the will specifically to tear us apart." "So you let her." The accusation came out flat, emotionless. "You let a dead woman destroy our family?" Lily flinched as if she'd been slapped again. "It wasn't that simple. Wasn't it? You had a choice, Lily. You could have told me about the will. We could have faced it together, figured out another way." "With what money?" Lily stood abruptly, her own anger finally surfacing. "You were in college, drowning in student loans. I was working retail, barely making rent.
When Mom and Dad died, we had funeral expenses, medical bills, their mortgage.
So you took the money and ran. I took the money so we'd survive. Lily's voice cracked with emotion. Do you think I wanted to disappear? Do you think I enjoyed watching you struggle while I lived in luxury? You watched me? The question came out as a whisper. Lily's face crumpled. I never stopped watching. I knew about your jobs, your apartment, your struggles. I wanted to help so many times, but I couldn't. Because of money. Because of your precious inheritance. Because I was trapped. Lily slammed her hand on the desk, making Aliza jump. Don't you understand? Eleanor won. Even from the grave, she got exactly what she wanted. She turned us against each other. Aliza stared at her sister, this stranger in expensive clothes who claimed to have been suffering in silence while accumulating wealth. The explanation felt both impossible and inevitable, like a puzzle piece that fit perfectly while destroying the entire picture. The 5 years are up. That's why you're here now. That's why you risked talking to me. Lily nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. 3 months ago, I could finally reach out, but I didn't know how. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell someone you love that you chose money over them, even if you had good reasons? You don't, Aliza said quietly. You don't explain it because it's inexplicable. She moved toward the door, her legs unsteady, but her resolve clear. You made your choice, Lily. You chose Eleanor's money over our family. And now you want forgiveness because a calendar says you're allowed to feel guilty again? Aliza, please. But Aliza was already walking away, leaving her sister alone in her palace of regret and expensive furniture, surrounded by all the wealth that had cost her everything that truly mattered. Aliza's hands shook as she turned the key to her studio apartment, the familiar sound of the lock clicking open somehow foreign after everything that had happened. The cramped space, with its secondhand furniture and water stains on the ceiling, felt like stepping into a different universe after Lily's palatial office. She dropped her purse by the door and stood in the middle of the room, staring at her reflection in the black screen of her ancient television. The woman looking back at her seemed smaller somehow, diminished by revelations that had rewritten 5 years of history in the span of an hour. Eleanor's will, forced estrangement, Lily watching from a distance while Aliza struggled to survive. The story felt both impossible and inevitable, like discovering that gravity had been working backward all along. But if it was true, if Lily had been trapped by her grandmother's manipulative final act, then everything Aliza had believed about her sister's abandonment crumbled into dust. She needed proof. She needed facts. She needed something more concrete than Lily's tears and explanations delivered in a room that cost more than most people's houses. The cardboard boxes under her bed had been untouched for years. Aliza dragged them out with trembling hands, their contents spilling across her threadbare carpet like memories given physical form. Photos, documents, letters, the detritus of a family that had once been whole. The first box held school pictures and birthday cards, remnants of a childhood that felt like it belonged to someone else. Here was 8-year-old Lily helping 6-year-old Aliza learn to ride a bike. Here was Christmas morning 3 years later, both girls grinning beside a tree that their parents had somehow afforded despite their modest means. But it was the second box that made Aliza's breath catch. Legal documents from their parents' estate, funeral programs, sympathy cards from neighbors and friends. And underneath it all, a manila envelope marked Family Records in their mother's careful handwriting. Inside, Aliza found what she hadn't known she was looking for: correspondence between her mother and Eleanor Anderson dating back more than 30 years. The early letters were formal, distant. Eleanor's handwriting was precise and cold, each word chosen to maintain maximum emotional distance. But as Aliza read further, the temperature dropped even more dramatically. Your decision to marry that man shows a complete disregard for family legacy and social position. You are choosing temporary passion over permanent prosperity, and you will regret this choice for the rest of your life. Their mother's responses grew shorter and more defensive over time, until they stopped altogether.
The final letter in the stack was dated just 2 years after Aliza's birth, Eleanor's response to an invitation to visit her new granddaughter. I have no interest in meeting the children of this misalliance. You made your choice, Sarah. Live with the consequences. Aliza stared at the letter until the words blurred, trying to reconcile the grandmother that she barely known with the woman who had crafted such deliberate cruelty. This wasn't just disapproval. It was calculated emotional warfare, designed to punish an entire family for one woman's choice to marry for love instead of money. A knock at her door made her jump, scattering papers across the floor. She opened it to find David Kim standing in the hallway, his social work textbooks tucked under his arm and concern written across his face. I heard what happened at the bank. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store called me. She said you were in some kind of public fight with... He stopped, taking in her tear-stained face and the chaos of documents surrounding her. Jesus, Aliza, what's going on? David had been her closest friend since freshman year of college, the one person who'd watched her struggle without offering pity or judgment. He knew about Lily's disappearance, knew about the financial pressures that kept Aliza awake at night, knew about the pride that prevented her from accepting help even when she desperately needed it. She's alive, Aliza said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. Lily's alive, and she's been wealthy this whole time. David set down his books and moved into the apartment, carefully stepping around the scattered papers. What do you mean wealthy? I mean she owns the bank building. I mean she has enough money to live like royalty while I've been eating ramen noodles for dinner and choosing between groceries and gas money. That doesn't make sense. Why would... Because our grandmother left her everything, but only if she cut all ties with family for 5 years. Aliza gestured helplessly at the letters spread across her floor. Look at these, David. Look at what Aliza Anderson really thought of us. David knelt beside her, reading over the correspondence with growing amazement. His background in social work had exposed him to plenty of family dysfunction, but this level of calculated manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. He shook his head. This is psychological warfare. She deliberately designed this to destroy your family. And it worked. Aliza's voice was hollow. Lily chose the money. She chose Eleanor's legacy over our relationship. Did she? Or did she choose survival? David set down the letters and looked at her directly. Think about it, Aliza. You were both broke when your parents died. You had funeral expenses, student loans, no safety net. If someone offered you enough money to secure both your futures, but the price was 5 years of separation, I would have told her about it. We would have figured out another way.
In downtown's First National Bank, a struggling young woman was about to face her worst financial nightmare. What started as a routine banking transaction took a shocking turn when she came face to face with the sister who had vanished 5 years ago. Aliza Anderson wasn't your typical broke graduate. For 5 years, she had survived on 2 jobs and sheer determination, known for her fierce independence. When she encountered Lily's unexpected slap and public humiliation, she had no idea she was walking into a family secret worth millions. Aliza's desperate search for answers would lead to uncovering an inheritance designed to destroy them. What began as a declined card would become a journey of forgiveness that would change everything.
Eleanor planned this, she said when David returned with 2 steaming mugs. She didn't just disapprove of our family, she actively worked to destroy it. This will wasn't an inheritance, it was a weapon. David read Lily's letter twice, his expression growing more troubled with each line. His social work training had exposed him to family dysfunction, but this level of calculated psychological warfare was staggering. Your sister was 25 years old when she made this decision, he said finally. 25, grieving, broke, and facing an impossible choice designed by someone who wanted to prove that money was stronger than love. She chose the money, David. She chose to abandon me when I needed her most. Did she? Or did she choose to sacrifice her own happiness to secure both your futures? He set down the letter and looked at her directly. Aliza, you've been angry at Lily for 5 years for making what she thought was the best decision for both of you. But what if she was right? The question hit like a physical blow. Right? How could abandoning your sister ever be right? Look at where you are now. You have a business degree, work experience, a support system. You've struggled, yes, but you've also built something. What would have happened if you'd both spent the last 5 years drowning in debt? If you'd been so focused on survival that you never had the chance to grow? Aliza wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She thought about her college friends, the ones whose families had provided safety nets and opportunities. They'd graduated without crippling debt, moved into careers with confidence, never had to choose between groceries and textbooks. What might her life have looked like with that kind of security? She could have told me, Aliza said, but her voice lacked conviction. We could have made the decision together. Could you? Really? David leaned forward, his tone gentle but insistent. If Lily had come to you 5 years ago and said, I can inherit $12 million, but only if I cut ties with you for 5 years, what would you have said? The answer came without hesitation. I would have told her to refuse it. I would have said we'd figure out another way. And you both would have spent the next 5 years struggling to pay off funeral expenses and student loans while working minimum wage jobs. You would have sacrificed financial security for the principle of staying together. Yes, the word came out fierce, certain, because that's what family does. You don't abandon people you love no matter what. Even if abandoning them temporarily is the only way to save them permanently? The question hung between them, heavy with implications Aliza wasn't ready to accept. She thought about Lily's letter, about the careful calculations and desperate reasoning of a young woman trying to make an impossible choice. David pulled out his laptop and began typing, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. I want to show you something, he said, turning the screen toward her. I've been researching Aliza Anderson since you called this morning. The webpage displayed a local newspaper archive, headlines spanning several decades. Aliza's grandmother had been more than wealthy. She'd been a local power broker, using her real estate empire to influence city planning and development. But the articles also revealed a pattern of vindictive behavior towards anyone who crossed her. Look at this, David, he said, clicking on an article from 15 years ago. She destroyed a business partnership because her associate's daughter married someone she disapproved of. And this one, she bought a property specifically to prevent a low-income housing development, then left it vacant for years. More articles painted a picture of a woman who used wealth as a weapon, who believed that money could and should control human behavior. Aliza Anderson hadn't just been rich, she'd been systematically cruel to anyone who prioritized emotion over economics. She spent decades proving that money was more powerful than love, David said quietly. Your parents' marriage was just the most personal battlefield. Aliza stared at the screen, seeing her grandmother's legacy in a new light. She designed that will to break us apart, to prove that even sisters who loved each other would choose money over family when the pressure was high enough. And Lily fell into the trap, but maybe not the way Eleanor expected. What do you mean? David closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. Eleanor wanted to prove that people are fundamentally selfish, that given enough money, anyone will abandon their principles. But Lily didn't choose the money for herself. She chose it for you. She sacrificed her own happiness, her relationship with the person she loved most, because she thought it was the only way to give you both a future. The realization hit Aliza like a revelation, reframing 5 years of perceived abandonment as 5 years of sacrificial love. Lily hadn't been selfish, she had been selfless in the most devastating way possible. She's been watching me, Aliza said, remembering her sister's words in the bank office. She said she never stopped watching, that she wanted to help but couldn't. Because helping you would have triggered the will's conditions and destroyed the very future she was trying to secure. David's voice was gentle, understanding. She chose to suffer alone so you wouldn't have to suffer with her. Aliza thought about the past 5 years from this new perspective.
Every struggle, every sleepless night, every moment of despair, Lily had watched it all from a distance, unable to help, carrying the guilt of knowing she could solve every problem, but couldn't act without destroying everything. I called her selfish. I called her a bitch who abandoned her family. You called her what you needed to call her to survive your own pain. But now you know the truth. The question is what you're going to do with it. Aliza picked up Lily's letter again, reading the words with new understanding. Her sister's handwriting revealed not cold calculation, but desperate love, the kind of love that was willing to destroy itself to save what it cherished most. I need to see her again, she said finally. I don't know what I need to do. Apologize, forgive her, ask her to forgive me? Maybe all of those things, maybe none of them. David squeezed her hand. Maybe you just need to start over, knowing what you know now. As evening shadows lengthened across David's apartment, Aliza realized that Eleanor Anderson had been both right and wrong. Money could indeed destroy family bonds, but love, real love, might be strong enough to rebuild what manipulation had torn apart. The question was whether 5 years of separation and resentment had left enough foundation to build on, or if Eleanor's psychological warfare had succeeded in destroying something that could never be fully repaired. Only one way to find out. Aliza reached for her phone, her finger hovering over Lily's number, a contact she'd deleted and re-added dozens of times over the years, but never had the courage to call. Until now. The coffee shop Lily suggested was deliberately neutral, a small place downtown that neither sister had history with, somewhere they could meet without the weight of memory pressing down on them. Aliza arrived 15 minutes early, her palms sweating as she claimed a corner table near the window. The familiar anxiety of financial worry hit when she realized she'd have to buy something and her budget was already stretched thin for the week. She ordered the cheapest item on the menu, black coffee for $2, and sat nursing it while watching the door like a sentinel. Every time someone entered, her heart jumped, even though she knew Lily's silhouette by heart, knew the way her sister carried herself with that careful poise that had always made Aliza feel younger and less sophisticated. When Lily finally appeared, she looked different than she had at the bank. Less polished, more uncertain. She wore jeans and a simple blouse instead of her expensive suit, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look more like the sister Aliza remembered. But the designer handbag and the way she moved, like someone comfortable with her place in the world, still marked the distance between their circumstances. "Hi," Lily said, sliding into the chair across from her. The word carried the weight of 5 years of silence. "Hi," Aliza wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, using its warmth to study herself. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, both sisters studying their hands rather than looking at each other. The easy familiarity they once shared felt as distant as childhood, replaced by the careful politeness of strangers who happened to share DNA. "I wasn't sure you'd call," Lily said finally. "After yesterday, after how I acted," she shook her head. "I've had 5 years to plan what I'd say to you, and when the moment came, I handled it terribly." "We both did." Aliza forced herself to look up, to meet her sister's eyes. They were the same warm brown she remembered, but there were lines around them now, evidence of stress and sleepless nights that expensive skincare couldn't completely hide. "I said some awful things." Lily ordered a latte, something with oat milk and an extra shot that cost more than Aliza's entire lunch budget, and they fell into silence again. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with normal life. Students studying, business people holding meetings, friends catching up, all of them navigating relationships that hadn't been poisoned by dead grandmothers and impossible choices. "I saw James Morrison yesterday," Aliza said, deciding that direct honesty was the only way forward. "He showed me your letter, the one you wrote but never sent." Lily's face went pale. "He wasn't supposed to keep that. He kept it because he felt guilty, because he knew Eleanor's will was designed to destroy us, and he watched it happen anyway." Aliza pulled the letter from her purse, its edges soft from repeated handling. "I've read this probably 50 times since yesterday." "Aliza, please.
You thought you were saving us both. The words came out in a rush, as if speaking them slowly would make them too difficult to say. You thought 5 years of separation was better than a lifetime of struggling. Lily's composure cracked, tears gathering in her eyes. I thought I was being practical. I thought I was making the mature choice. You were 25 years old and grieving. There was nothing mature about the position Eleanor put you in. But I still chose the money. I still abandoned you when you needed me most. Lily's voice broke slightly. I told myself it was for both of us, but maybe I was just being selfish. Maybe I wanted the security more than I wanted to do the right thing. Aliza studied her sister's face, seeing not the polished woman from the bank, but someone who'd been carrying guilt and regret for 5 years. Do you want to know what I would have said if you'd told me about the will? I think I know. I would have told you to refuse it. I would have said we'd figure out another way, that family was more important than money. I paused, letting the admission settle between them. And we both would have spent the last 5 years drowning in debt, while I felt morally superior about our choice. Lily looked up sharply, surprise replacing the guilt in her expression. I've been thinking about it, about what our lives would have looked like without Eleanor's money. We would have struggled, Lily, really struggled. I might never have finished my degree. You'd probably still be working retail. We'd have been so focused on survival that we wouldn't have had space to grow. You don't know that. Don't I? Look at where I am now, even with the struggles. I have work experience, skills, connections. Yes, it's been hard, but I've built something. What would I have built if I'd spent 5 years helping you pay off funeral expenses and student loans? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither sister wanted to fully explore. Lily wiped her eyes with a napkin, leaving smudges of mascara on the white paper. She said quietly, I watched you the whole time. I knew about your jobs, your apartment, your struggles. There were so many times I wanted to help, to send money anonymously or pay off your loans or just call and tell you it was going to be okay. Why didn't you? Because one contact would have voided the entire inheritance. One birthday card, one Christmas gift, one moment of weakness, and Eleanor would have won completely. We'd both have been left with nothing. Aliza thought about the implications of that. 5 years of watching someone you love struggle while being unable to help. The guilt and helplessness would have been crushing. It must have been torture, she said softly. It was, but it was supposed to be. That was Eleanor's real punishment, not just separating us, but making me complicit in your suffering, making me choose your financial future over your emotional well-being, then live with the consequences. They sat in contemplative silence, both sisters beginning to understand the true scope of their grandmother's psychological manipulation. Eleanor hadn't just wanted to separate them. She'd wanted to make them destroy each other, to prove that money could corrupt even the purest love. I'm still angry, Aliza said finally. I know you had reasons. I understand the impossible position you were in, but I'm still angry about the 5 years we lost. You should be. I'm angry too. At Eleanor, at myself, at the whole situation. Lily reached across the table tentatively, her hand stopping just short of Aliza's. But I'm also grateful that you're willing to sit here with me, knowing what you know now. I don't know what comes next. I don't know how to forgive 5 years of feeling abandoned, even if I understand why it happened. And I don't know how to accept help from you without feeling like I'm validating the choice you made. Maybe we don't figure it all out today. Maybe we just start with this. Sitting in a coffee shop, talking honestly for the first time in 5 years. Aliza looked at her sister, really looked at her, and saw not the wealthy woman from the bank,
but the woman who'd once braided her hair and helped her with her homework and stayed up all night when she had the flu. Damaged by circumstances, changed by time and stress and impossible choices, but fundamentally still the person who loved her enough to sacrifice everything for what she thought was their mutual future. "I'd like that," Aliza said finally, reaching out to touch her sister's hand. "I'd like to try." For the first time in 5 years, the Anderson sisters sat together without anger or accusations between them, beginning the long, uncertain work of rebuilding what Eleanor's manipulation had torn apart. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen quickly, but for the first time since their parents' funeral, it felt possible. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the coffee shop floor, marking the end of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. 2 weeks later, they met again. This time, Lily suggested her apartment, a penthouse overlooking the river that represented everything Aliza had imagined about her sister's new life. But when Aliza arrived, she found herself in a space that felt more like a beautiful prison than a home. The apartment was pristine, decorated with expensive furniture that looked like it had never been lived in. There were no personal photos, no books with worn spines, no coffee rings on tables or shoes kicked carelessly by the door. It was the home of someone who'd forgotten how to make a space feel lived in, how to create comfort instead of just displaying wealth. "It's lovely," Aliza said, though the word felt inadequate for the marble countertops and floored-ceiling windows. "It's empty," Aliza replied, her honesty surprising them both. "I bought it 3 years ago because it seemed like what successful people were supposed to want, but I've never figured out how to make it feel like home." They settled on the couch, white leather that probably cost more than Aliza's car, with glasses of wine that Lily poured from a bottle she admitted she'd been saving for a special occasion. The alcohol helped ease the lingering awkwardness between them, loosening tongues that had been carefully guarded for too long. "Tell me about the 5 years," Aliza said, curling her legs under her. "Not the business parts, not the inheritance. Tell me what it was like for you." Lily was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights reflected in the river below. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Lonely. It was incredibly lonely. She took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "I kept up with you through social media, through mutual friends, through Morrison's contacts. I knew when you graduated, when you got your first job, when you moved apartment. I celebrated your successes from a distance and worried about your struggles without being able to help." That sounds torturous. It was, but it was the only way I could feel connected to you. I had all this money, all these opportunities, but the one thing I wanted most, to share them with you, was the one thing I couldn't do. I thought about my own 5 years. The anger and resentment that had become such constant companions, I'd forgotten what it felt like to exist without them. I turned you into a villain in my head. It was easier than missing you. I turned myself into a villain, too. Every night, I'd lie awake thinking about different choices I could have made, wondering if there was some other way I could have handled Eleanor's ultimatum. I convinced myself that you were better off without me, that my presence in your life had always been more burden than blessing. That's not true.
Isn't it? Think about when we were kids, Aliza. I was always the responsible one, the one who had to take care of things. You were the dreamer, the creative one, but I was constantly having to pull you back to reality. Maybe you needed those 5 years to grow without my shadow hanging over you. The observation stung because it carried a grain of truth. Aliza had always been the younger sister, the one who looked to Lily for guidance and protection. The forced independence of the last 5 years had shaped her in ways that might not have happened if she'd had her sister's support to fall back on. "Maybe I did need to grow up on my own," Aliza admitted. But that doesn't mean I didn't need my sister, too. There were so many times I wanted to call you, to ask for advice, or just to hear your voice. When I got my first real job, when I had to go to the emergency room last year, when David and I... She stopped, realizing she was about to share something she hadn't even fully acknowledged to herself. When you and David what? Nothing, we're just friends. But the flush in her cheeks suggested otherwise. Lily smiled, the first genuine smile Aliza had seen from her since they'd reconnected. You love him. It's complicated. He's been my best friend through all of this, my emotional anchor. But I've been so focused on survival that I haven't had space for anything else. And now? She gestured helplessly. Now everything is changing, and I don't know how to navigate any of it. Does he know how you feel? I think so. Maybe? He's been incredibly patient, never pushing for more than I could give. But I can see it in his eyes sometimes. He wants more, and part of me wants that too, but I'm terrified of risking the one stable relationship I have. Lily reached over and squeezed her hand. You deserve love, Aliza. You deserve someone who sees your strength and your vulnerability and chooses to stay anyway.
As the clients left with signed contracts in hand, Lily appeared in the office doorway, still wearing the conservative suit that marked her business meetings, but carrying 2 cups of coffee and a genuine smile. Heard it went well? She said, handing Aliza her usual order, black coffee with 1 sugar, the way she'd been drinking it since she couldn't afford anything fancier. Better than well. We landed the contract and they want to discuss expanding the scope. Aliza accepted the coffee gratefully, noting how Lily had learned to show support without overstepping boundaries. What about your meeting with the zoning committee? Approved. The community center project is moving forward. Lily's smile widened. Groundbreaking is scheduled for next month. The community center was their joint project. Aliza's idea, Lily's funding, and both sisters' commitment to creating something positive in the neighborhood where they'd grown up. It would provide job training, childcare, and financial counseling for families navigating the same struggles the Anderson sisters had once faced. More importantly, it represented their rejection of Eleanor's philosophy that money should be hoarded and used for control rather than shared for community benefit. Mom and Dad would be proud, Aliza said quietly, and for the first time in years, the mention of their parents brought comfort instead of pain. They would. They'd also probably laugh at how long it took us to figure out how to work together again. She settled into the chair across from Aliza's desk, a simple piece they'd chosen together, professional but not intimidating. Speaking of which, I have something for you. She pulled an envelope from her purse, official-looking but not ominous. Aliza opened it to find legal documents transferring a significant portion of Eleanor's estate directly into her name. No strings attached. Lily, I can't. You can, and you should. This isn't charity, and it's not guilt money. It's what should have happened 5 years ago if our grandmother hadn't been a manipulative monster. Lily's voice was firm but warm. I've had enough time with Eleanor's money to know what I want to do with it. Some of it goes to the business, some to the community center, some to other projects we haven't dreamed up yet. But a significant portion belongs to you, free and clear. Aliza stared at the documents, seeing numbers that would eliminate every financial worry she'd ever had. This is life-changing money. Good. Your life should change. Both our lives should change. We've spent enough time surviving. Now we get to decide what we want to build. David appeared in the doorway, reading the situation with the perceptiveness that had drawn Aliza to him in the first place. Everything okay? Better than okay, Aliza said, though her voice shook slightly. "Just processing some big news." He moved behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders with the comfortable intimacy they'd developed. "Whatever it is, you'll figure it out. You always do." The simple confidence in his words steadied her, reminding her of how much her life had changed in the past 6 months. She had a successful business, a relationship built on genuine partnership, and now the financial security to make choices based on desire rather than desperation. "There's one more thing," Lily said, her tone growing more serious. "I think we should visit their graves. Together. It's been 5 years since either of us has been there, and I think they'd want to know we found our way back to each other." The suggestion brought tears to Aliza's eyes. The cemetery had been too painful to visit alone, too charged with grief and abandonment. But with Lily beside her, it might finally be possible to say goodbye properly and thank their parents for the love that had ultimately survived even Eleanor's manipulation. "I'd like that," Aliza said. "I'd like to tell them about the business, about the community center, about how we chose love over Eleanor's legacy." They made plans to visit the following weekend, then spent the evening walking through the neighborhood where they'd grown up, pointing out changes and sharing memories that no longer carried the sharp edge of loss. David joined them, adding his own observations about community development and urban planning, fitting naturally into the space between the sisters without trying to fill the gaps that belonged only to them. As the sun set over the city they were helping to reshape, Aliza realized that Eleanor Anderson had been both completely wrong and accidentally right. Money had indeed changed their family, but instead of destroying their bonds, it had given them the tools to build something stronger than what they'd lost. The inheritance had been meant as a weapon of division, but in the hands of two sisters who refused to let a dead woman define their future, it had become the foundation for a legacy of love, community, and hope. Eleanor wanted to prove that money was more powerful than family bonds. Instead, she'd given them the resources to prove that family bonds, tested, broken, and rebuilt, could transform money from a tool of control into an instrument of healing. Standing together in the fading light, the Anderson sisters looked toward a future they would build together, free from the shadows of manipulation and rich with the possibility that love, given enough time and forgiveness, could indeed conquer all.